Hey, welcome to the podcast. I have a guest with me today, and I'm not going to introduce the guest. I'm not being rude. I'm just going to ask our guest to introduce themselves. So go ahead, guest. Please introduce yourself.
Well, hello. My name's Matt. I run an agency called Chick Digital, and basically we're a development agency, and we work with mainly small and medium businesses, and help them make the most out of the technical landscape. Basically, work with them to find ways that they can exploit or take advantage of all of this new technology that's all around us all of the time.
Excellent. So the reason I want to speak to you today, you won't have had it yet because it's not published yet, but by the time this episode goes out, it will be. For the first episode, I interviewed a gentleman called Norman Sanders, and he introduced computer-aided design to Boeing in the 1950s. And there was some resistance, and I wanted to speak to you because I know that one of your specialist topics is AI. And at the moment in the world of SEO, everyone's wetting their knickers over AI, basically. I can't think of a better way to put it, really. There's lots of what I think might be unfounded fears. So, because I'm not the expert on AI, I thought the very fact that you run a dev agency that helps people get the most out of tech, you'd be a good person to speak to about it. So, everyone has their own different definition of AI. So, the one that everyone in the world of SEO is panicking about at the moment is that they might be an AI where you can press a button and it will generate thousands of articles that will then, wash over Google like some torrent of silage or sewage or something. But that's not my definition at the moment. I haven't really formed one. So, Matt, what's your definition of AI in the context of your working life?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because to some extent, I just see AI as the latest evolution on the kind of technical um, evolution of man, for want of a better word. I mean,
Wow.
if you go back to the Industrial Revolution, all of these things, it ultimately all comes back to sort of automating tasks and automating ways of working and the kind of you see the resistance at every single stage in human history in terms of you had the Luddites, a lot of resistance to or a lot of firms who didn't know how to handle the internet or how to cope with it, and a lot of businesses went out of business in the long run just because they never really got a handle on how to work differently in a digital world. So I mean, in terms of AI and what I sort of consider it, I basically consider it anything where you are leaving the computer to make judgments for you or to get answers for you. I mean, we've had things like big data for years, and that was basically AI is an extension of that. Whereas with big data, we were pulling information together to try to get answers. This is actually giving you the answers. So it's a little bit like the example I always use is Apple, so or music more specifically, which I know is something that you like. But if you go back along, we used to have records, then we had tapes, then we had CDs, and then um, along came Apple and allowed you to save all of your stuff onto your computer. And to begin with, that was great because it was all there. You could search for it. And now, as it's evolved and Spotify there is actually telling you what you want to be listening to, and it knows better than you do what you want to be listening to. And I think that's really where the evolution, um, basically, it's from being big data, which is big data. All of your files are available, all of your music is available in one place. To actually, artificial intelligence is actually using that information to make recommendations and to change people's behaviours without a human sitting there driving that.
There's several things I'd like to unpack in that. I think that you've covered quite a lot of ground in quite a short time there. There's the
Yeah,
first element about being left behind. So the Luddites, were they the people who were smashing the mills?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly that. So
So
yeah.
industrial revolution, jobs that took whole towns of people with a needle and thread could
Mm,
suddenly be done by large machines in in mills. So some people, the Luddites, went out and smashed it. I'm very hazy on that period of history, but is that roughly the right thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm no massive historian, but broadly speaking, that's my understanding of how it went down.
That angle's interesting to me because there's a slightly cliched argument that you shouldn't allow people to use diggers on building sites. The argument being that one digger takes away the job of 20 people with shovels. But
Yeah,
then perhaps you shouldn't use shovels on a building site. You should use teaspoons because those 10 shovels take away the job of 200 people with teaspoons. Now, those 200 people with teaspoons have put 1,000 people with toothpicks out of work. And, it's an inevitable moving forward, like a tide pushing into a shoreline as
yeah,
technology advances. So yeah, that's an interesting analogy. I mean, one of my theories on this is that this change isn't a new thing. We didn't look at the news in January 2023 and say, "Oh my God, look at this AI thing." It's just that it's almost like some brands have managed to coalesce it into a thing. They've branded it.
mm,
As much as the internet initially was very disparate until people like AOL came together and said, "Right, we're going to take all these elements that are sort of existing anyway, and we're going to trash it with capitalism or whatever." What's your thought on that?
yeah. I think there's definitely an element of of branding things. It's like I always liken it to when we had the big sort of craft beer explosion. You'd notice that you'd go into the shop and all of a sudden beers that have been there for years had suddenly been rebranded to make them look like crafty. So all of a sudden now, pedigree suddenly looks like it's been made by a hipster, whereas it's exactly the same beer that people have been drinking for 100 years. So I think there's an element of that where people realise that it's a buzzword, and when a buzzword comes around, it's a good way of um, unlocking spend from people because they feel it's something they should be doing. So a lot of people, it's not so much the case now, but it always used to be easier to get money out of people if it was for something digital than rather than something IT based because people felt like it was the way to go. And I think you're right. I think it's true with where people have started to brand it and people have started to talk about it. I think in the Wreath lectures last year, they had a series of conversations around AI and it being, one of the big aspects in human history. And I think it's kind of come to the forefront because people are bringing it to the forefront. And like you say, I think it's not. We didn't suddenly wake up and it's there. It's kind of always been there. It's just that I think it's just getting more airspace. It's getting more bandwidth from everybody. And I think also with it, I guess there's a lot of one of the interesting things with technology is that, and it comes back to your toothpick analogy to some extent of the the pace of technology always outstrips the kind of society's ability to actually process what that technology can do and decide how to respond to it. So it's like the legal frameworks are always well behind where we need to be with it, and also like the kind of ethical, moral sort of compass in terms of as a society deciding if this is something you want. Basically, by the time a society's come to terms with AI's here, which is probably the moment we're in at the moment, that actually AI's society's got to the point where actually AI's here, it's a real thing. We're going to have to start thinking about what we do about it. The technology is so far advanced that there's no sort of turning back the clock, and it's exactly the same with in the early e-commerce days when they're talking about it's killing the high street. Well, it's killed the high street, and
Mm.
we still haven't come up with a sensible response to it. And I guess the advantage, so certainly coming back to what you're saying at the beginning, like the fears within something like SEO, the advantage for the arbitrators there are really people like Google and Bing and the search engines. So to some extent, at least you've got there a body that can move quicker than than like a government can. So ultimately, the reason that Google's successful is because it gives people the content they want. So if they create a magic SEO button using AI to create all the content, Google are going to get wise to that and find ways. If they want to stay as a market leader in search, they're going to have to find ways of analyzing that and responding to that, so the best quality results still come top and the ones that are right. And I think that's, we've had spam articles for forever. If we're talking about the volume that's now going to bring up, and but it's obviously could increase through AI, but you've got a better arbitrator, not necessarily morally better, but certainly they've got the skills and the understanding to be able to respond to the changes. Whereas in other areas of society, AI, our way of handling it, like when you look at things like deep fake and all of this kind of stuff, we're so far off of actually getting to grips with what we're likely to be able to do with likely to be able to legislate about any of that. But really, that's where I think the bits are really where I have some apprehension around the use of AI. I think within a business context, it's broadly right, and I think broadly we'll have to get used to it and evolve like we have with all the other technological advances.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the e-commerce and the high street, it certainly has killed the high street in a lot of places, but there are a lot of places. Bury St Edmunds near us, we're both in Suffolk in the UK, still has a really nice collection of shops. So does Norwich. A lot of places do. Places like Ipswich are dead.
Mm.
And what surprises me about that is it's the large brands that either didn't embrace the shift to online. I mean, huge brands like
Mm.
Debenhams, Phoenix. There's loads. I'm not going to start listing places that don't exist anymore. That they didn't shift fast enough. But it appears to have been the smaller places that perhaps have more flexibility, that embrace that technology, that are still there. I mean, I had a record shop in about 2004, and we had an online store. Because I'm a tech and I do SEO, I could embrace that. But I think the fact that there's more boutique shops now is a sign that when technology like this comes along, some people will just run from it and say, I'm not changing. And those people, unfortunately, tend to fall by the wayside. There's the people who embrace, run face first into everything, which I think I'm sometimes guilty of. Sorry, excuse me. But then there's also the people who because this tech has been around for a while now. I'm talking about the internet. Because this tech's been around for a while now, there are people who will listen. And perhaps a lot of business owners have now spotted the warning signs or the opportunities. I don't want this to be a fully negative thing. And it's quite normal now for example, small boutique clothes shops to embrace Instagram or whatever,
Mm.
and just see it as a natural part of their business. So yeah, I think smaller businesses possibly have a larger opportunity than very large businesses who have to get together a strategy team and do all these kind of things. So obviously, you don't have to give away any of your secret work that you do at Chick Digital. But I mean, what's your experience? What size businesses do you work with when you're doing AI type work?
For AI type work, it does tend to be small businesses, for exactly the reasons that you're talking about. I mean, I think really with any new technology, I think you've really got three ways of approaching it. Well, four ways. The fourth way is to ignore it,
Mm,
which is what means you end up like Debenhams
mm,
or that kind of thing. But realistically, you've got to either use it to automate stuff. You need to look at your business and see what adds value, basically, and what doesn't. And you can either use strategically, you can then make the choice of either we use this technology to automate the things that don't use value, so we've got more time to do the things that do. You can look at the things that add value and then look to see if the technology can help you to improve that even further or do something even more. Or the final option is that you can pivot completely away from it. But if you pivot completely away from it, you need to actually That needs to be a strategic decision, and you need to think about what you're going to do, because you not using it won't stop other people from using it. And that's, I think, where you get these boutique shops where their internet presence might be very small, it might be quite niche, but they've actually managed to uh, build up a successful business based on the opportunities they see in front of them, which is niche, which is personalized service, which is having a human you can talk to. Um, and I
That that
think,
that
sorry,
that's an angle that from I'm speaking as an SEO person. That's an angle that always really interests me. A lot of the research we do when we work with clients is trying to find those gaps, and all the time. And this goes back 20 years. People in business will assume there's no point in doing it because everyone else is doing it or everyone else is doing it better. And my goodness, SEO proves that wrong all the time. We're still the giant killers, and I think that long may that continue. That you can start any business, and if you do SEO as a part of many, many, many other things, you can still dominate fairly swiftly. And I see the kind of AI tools you're talking about as just being a part of that process. Let's what can we do to make things faster? So in in SEO, for example, if we're going to write an article, we'll use various SEO tools to make sure there's an appetite for that article. So can you give us a real world example of where a project you've done where you've brought extra value and a higher level of automation to a process that has helped move a client forward?
yeah, of course. So I think, as I mentioned, we tend to approach AI. We call it accessible AI, with the idea that at the moment only 15% of businesses are using AI, and that's mainly because most of the small businesses aren't. When you look at the large businesses, they're spending big money on AI. It's part of the big teams that are sitting around drawing up strategies, integrating it, doing all of that kind of stuff. Whereas I think with small businesses, they've got the barriers there that stop them. They don't have the skills, they don't have the money for the huge, great projects. And I think what we've tried to focus on people is how you can actually use AI without it having to be this huge, life-changing investment, and actually just picking some of the technologies, or getting people like us to help you with those technologies to actually help automate and understand things better. So one of the things we've really focused on, because we're kind of always quite heavily lent towards data and insight, is using using that kind of old AI to basically allow us to analyze text data to gain insights that we wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So, like, a couple examples are, we worked with a copywriting agency, and we analyzed the entire website using AI, and we used that to understand things like how easy the text is to read, how easy it is for, or what the key subjects, what's the tone of voice, what personality is coming across in that. And now, if you think about that as a job in a copyright agency, that's a huge task, because it's hugely important that your text is consistent and on point and on brand. And obviously, they do loads of work around what their tone of voice should be. And what we were able to do is analyze, in within hours, analyze thousands of blog posts and thousands of pages to actually pull out what the content was saying to people, not so much in the text, but in terms of its tone of voice and in terms of how it's going to be perceived and how easy it is to read. And that allows people to understand, actually, are they communicating to their customers in the way they want to, without having to pay somebody to read through 1,000 articles. So that's, I think, a really sort of powerful way where you can, I think, that gives you a bit of both. You can automate a task that takes a long time, but you can also quantify to some extent the qualitative data, so you can make better decisions. So, at this particular, we're able to work with this agency to demonstrate that over time their tone of voice had become more professional, more conscientious.
Wow.
And that was exactly what they were aiming for, because they were trying to position themselves as a copywriter to law firms, and a copywriter to accountants, and a copywriter to big enterprises that would want to be. So they want somebody who's going to be conscientious, who's going to have a very professional tone of voice. And the last thing you want in that is to find a few blog posts that have got some real neurotic, sort of over the top comments that then just completely throw doubt on, if someone came across them, would throw doubt on, actually, are these people the right people? And if you think about the volume of content that gets created now, actually getting a handle on what your content's saying and how it's saying it is huge. But that was something that was relatively accessible and relatively easy to do and relatively affordable, and could be used. It could be used in SEO. It could be used internally. It could even be used internally on your own, like on your internal comms in larger organisations, without having to go through the whole kind of cycle of making something, an embedded program. It literally can be just a case study or a research piece that's making use of AI. And I think that's a way a lot of smaller firms can kind of look to actually get involved in AI for the first time, is look at what tools are out there, talk to technologists or people that might be able to actually take what their challenges are and find innovative ways of solving them with these technologies.
You've hit on something there which I think I see as a real opportunity in AI, and you mentioned earlier about how AI can give answers for things faster. And whenever we're looking at large sets of data, be it Google Analytics or anything, so I'm just sort of vaguely keeping this on an SEO track. When we look at data, quite often the results we can get from data analysis are restricted by the questions that we can think to ask. So where I see projects like the one you just discussed as being really interesting and potentially revolutionary is that instead of a data analysis project being an input-output thing, so, what questions are we going to input, what's going to come out of it, I'm kind of hoping AI is going to give us the opportunity to pose questions that we might not thought of asking. Is that hopeful, or am I sort of
No,
roughly ballpark there?
no. I think you're right. So certainly, I mean, we're kind of on a journey with our AI products and our AI work, in terms of, I think we've worked out that there's a lot of stuff we can do with this, and it's finding the best applications and working with people to find those. And I think one of the things we're really keen to look at is, actually, if we were to take data like, whether that's transactional data or in your case, looking at SEO data or Google Analytics data, is actually the bit that's involved in that is, okay, well, this post as well, this post hasn't done so well, this is converted more, this is converted less. And actually, the bit that data never tells you is, well, is that because of the way it's written? Is that because of the actual qualitative facts that, I guess, separate out a good SEO agency from, someone churning out just mindless content, is actually that fact of, well, yeah, when you write in this tone, it actually converts better. I mean, I saw really
Wow, no, that's
interesting.
really powerful.
Yeah, I think I saw really interesting talk recently, and it was talking about, I guess, kind of like persuasive marketing and persuasive copy, and it's all of these things about, if you write in a particular way, you can get a particular result, and that we don't get that currently out of Google Analytics. It's we can just see that, well, this post did well and this post didn't, and we can look at maybe some of the factors of the links that were coming into it, but we can't actually look at the difference between, is the reason this article does well because it's actually a really good article and it's actually written nicely and it actually makes the people do what you they'll
Well,
do.
I think you've hit upon an example there, and I like talking about content examples because we are, it's one of our specialisms here, the SEO. Now, what I really like about that is potentially that copywriting agency could have seen AI as a threat, because a large part of the skill for a good copywriter is understanding tone and is thinking about how to persuade and how to motivate. But instead of saying, oh no, AI is going to ruin that, they've kind of taken it and said, okay, well, how can we get better faster with the
Mm.
content? And that, yeah, I think I'm not really sort of arriving at a point here other than just to celebrate that. I think, that's great. It's kind of saying what makes us unique as humans? What's our human input to this?
Mm.
And how can we use AI to make ourselves more efficient as humans? You're not taking the humans out of the whole process. And I think that's one of the threats that people misunderstand with AI is that it doesn't tend to replace human beings for everything.
No.
It's like owning a dishwasher sometimes. Yeah, you can stand there for 20 minutes and wash up, or you can cram everything in the dishwasher and kick the door shut and hope, I was going to say, and hope for the best. That probably gives you more of an insight into how I use dishwashers than anything else. But, it's saying, right, well, this one part of it that is repetitive could probably be not done by a human.
Yeah, I think you're right, and it also just the scale of that repetitiveness. So I mean, I know, so one of the things that we've looked at in our copyright example, in terms of looking to explore, is that what happens, in a big organization where you've had 6 different marketing managers, you've had 12 different agencies working on different projects. Actually, how consistent is that across all of that? And at the moment, normally, if you get an agency in, they'll look at what you've done and have a quick look around your website and probably give you they'll do some work around how your tone of voice should be, and then moving forward, they'll write in that way. But actually, this opens up a whole new world of possibilities of actually auditing what's there without having to pay somebody to sit there and read it all, to say, well, look, we've analyzed all of your content for the last 10 years, and there's this weird bit in 2016 to 2018 where it's completely off base compared to what everybody, what all of your other content is. Or so we need to revisit that, because that stuff's still out in the wild, and that stuff's still going to be changing opinions of you. Or similarly, using that as a way of validating your work, of actually saying, well, look, we told you needed to be more professional in your copy. We've been working with you for 6 months. You can see how the tone of voice has improved over that time and how that consistency's happened. So it does, I think it's a tool that you want to use, and at the end of the day, you can choose how to make the best out of it and use it. But it comes back to your digger example of, do you really want to be the firm that's known for digging with spades because or do you want to use a digger for some of the bigger bits? Yeah, yeah. Or do you want to use a digger for some of those bits, because that's that's a challenge in the crossroads I guess we're at from a AI perspective of, if you're going to keep on digging with spades, you need to sort of explain the benefits and hone in on those benefits and make sure that your clients see them and perceive them and understand them. Otherwise, they'll just go and get a digger.
You've highlighted something else here, and that's the cross-pollination of different disciplines around data, because really good things happen in the world as a whole when people in different disciplines join together to use new technologies. I mean, we're recording video for this. I don't know if we're going to use it or not, because I don't know, just because I don't know. But if anyone is watching the video, they would have seen you said something there, and my jaw dropped, because you mentioned something in that project that for an SEO agency would be fantastically powerful. We spend a lot of time looking back at old content, trying to figure out which bits of content to optimize. And if we're working with a client who has hundreds or even thousands of articles, we have certain things we can do very manually, like, well, let's see which articles have dipped in rankings in the last few years. Let's see which ones are sort of on the verge of greatness. But we can't take tone into account. We can't. There's loads of things that you've just mentioned that we can't take into account. So it still requires a human, and it's a laborious process. We do it because it's a really good thing to do, but there's an example of cross pollination where you're just telling me about this one thing over here, and me, as you're a dev, I'm an SEO. Sorry, in SEO. I never like that an SEO thing. Just in discussion for the purpose of this podcast, the cross pollination of that, I've gone, wow, actually, no, that's really cool. I can see that as being a big advantage, and ultimately, that would give us more time to spend looking for new opportunities. It's. I don't think we're riding the crest of a wave with technology like AI. I think we're swimming. We're bobbing around, and occasionally we bump into another swimmer and help each other out. That's a weird analogy, isn't it? But
No, I think I know what you mean, and it's actually we did a really interesting project with a fashion brand or a fragrance brand, basically, and it was using content available online to better understand people's that like particular perfumes also like this kind of perfume because or fragrance. I'm not the greatest with all of the differences
smells,
around all the different smells.
crazy world, a lot of smells.
Yeah, and but there's a huge sort of subset of people who, or what a subset sounds wrong, but
It's all right. Look,
there's
we're both in tech. We can break down to unemotional terms when talking
yeah
about humans. I mean, unfortunately, we have to.
yeah. So, but there's a huge subset of people who really love fragrances and can talk about them all day and have opinions, and apparently even they'll like to me. I thought there was a world where you got as high as, I don't know, CK1, and that was like a good
A
one. But
pinnacle.
there's a whole level above that of stuff where you're getting into sort of four figures for a
What?
bottle of perfume or a bottle
Wow.
of aftershave, and it's amazing. You get people who will buy vintage ones, and but what is really interesting is one of the huge challenges that if you're a perfume brand or if you do that kind of stuff, and it's similar with anything, is how can you sell something that is sensory online? And that's, other than by price. So up until now, most sensory stuff, like, I used to work in furniture, and people would buy online because it was cheaper than going into a store. They'd normally go into the store and sit on a sofa and say, yes, this is the sofa I want, and then go home and try to find it cheaper online. Whereas with, so it might be the case that you smell a perfume, you like it, you find it cheaper online. But if you're actually doing something that isn't just trying to compete on price, how can you get people shopping online for sensory stuff? And a lot of that comes down to understanding what people are going to like, and putting them, making sure that experience is right. And that's where, again, where AI can help, is that, and big data, and this is where all of the lines sort of cross, isn't it? But it's like, actually, if we know that, you really like CK1, there's a pretty good chance you're going to like something else. And, that's where the opportunities, are in AI for a firm that really is all about the sort of creativity of creating fragrances.
It's the creativity angle of it that always interests me. There's a really famous person in advertising called David Ogilvy. He kind of invented the advertising game, as it were, in the way we see it today. He died many years ago, and I often think if he could see what we're able to do now, he would it would kill him. No, I mean, I was trying to think of a good way of saying that, and I realized he's already dead. So his
Yeah.
whole principle was learn about your audience. So they had to do that in the 40s and 50s and 60s by doing focus groups, doing test campaigns in newspapers where they couldn't really get any direct feedback. And then the job of the ad copywriter is appeal to the emotions and other less tangible parts of what motivates people to buy. So with your fragrance example, being able to say, hey, Mr. Ogby, you're going to sell a £4,000 bottle of aftershave because we know these people have a preference for the color purple, and it could be absolutely anything, couldn't it? I was trying to think of a really obscure example, like these people always scratch their left ear with their right hand or something, but it could be it could
Yeah,
be
it's
almost anything. And that goes back to AI giving you the questions to ask, not just
yeah,
being an input output thing to give you the answers.
Yeah, and I think also finding correlations that are you weren't expecting and you weren't looking for, because obviously you tend to start with a hypothesis, don't you? Of like, I think this page ranked really well because it was, or lots of this page had a good dwell time because it had lots of funny jokes in it or whatever, and where you know AI can help is it can actually just it takes out that hypothesis side of it to some extent and actually can find things that you weren't expecting at all. And that's, I mean, what we found, sort of going back to that copywriting example, was we just basically just chucked our whole suite of AI tools at it to see what all of them said, and then focused in on the bits that were interesting. And you know, we looked at ease of read, and to be honest, every single article is easy to read. So okay, great, that we know that we registered that and move on. But when you got into the personality bit, that was much more interesting because you could see actually how the tone of voice was changing. But we didn't know before we started that what our major findings would be. The first finding might have been, well, here, look, some of your right articles are impossible to read. So
Mm.
there's your
That's a good one
big
to know
problem.
if you're a copywriting agency, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and but it's so I think it's that with it's just you can kind of just keep on adding in other checks and other things that you look at to try to understand those opportunities, and you just build up this wealth of data. And then the biggest challenge in some ways is finding ways of communicating that data, because um, it brings back so much information that being AI is normally numerical. And
Well, that's
yeah,
then another discipline.
mm,
I know a guy, done bits of work with. Actually, there's a guy who he designed the SEO logo. He's a designer, but he's a designer of data visualization.
mm,
So he takes the kind of data that your processes would create, and it's his job to make it pretty pictures. He will slam me for saying that because that is a horrible oversimplification, but it's kind of true. You know,
yeah,
it really is. It's saying here's a phenomenal amount of data. Make it something I can shout across a room, and the person on the other side will understand what we've learned.
mm. I think I think you're right. I mean, we have um, designers who've yeah, data design, whatever you want to call them, data visualization people that we use. And to be fair, a lot of the input, and we're quite good at it, but a lot of it's come from just experience of working with people who understand the business. A lot of it, that sort of stuff, comes from the business need of like.
Mm.
So one of our big clients work in the wholesale industry, and I guess their sort of stuff is probably the borderline between big data and AI. It's there's so much data there that although we're not using always AI to analyze it, we do sometimes. Just that volume of it, just making it readable, is kind of really leveraging the powers of of technology. And I can remember one of the very first meetings we're in, and they were saying, "Well, look, the point of we've got these series of dashboards. So there's like 20 dashboards that visualize different aspects of suppliers' performance." And I can remember in the first meeting we had about this going back nearly 8 years, I think, and they would literally like, well, the point of this page is so that if I am an account manager, I can go in and I can say to somebody on my tablet, turn it around to them and say, look at this number. I want to talk to you about this number.
Mm.
And it's that kind of understanding what people are looking for, and how what kind of visuals people will respond to. And like you say, I mean, it's all really easy to say, oh, yeah, let's just chuck it in a chart, put it into Excel and do that. But the skill involved in visualizing the data is huge. And
Getting the charts only really the first step of the journey. I mean, the
mm,
stuff that you guys do, and well, we do as well. To be fair, in SEO, although from very different angles, we're only getting business owners and analysts to step one
mm,
of a long journey. I've been in and out of factory, loads of different places over the years, and factories. There's one factory I went in once. These huge screens, and even when you're up close to them, it was just a lot of graphs. I have no idea why they were doing it. I understood that industry well, because like you, we start working with a client in a new industry. We're on a steep learning curve, and I don't know why they were doing it. I was always thinking, well, who's looking at that and making decisions about what happens tomorrow or what's going to happen in 5 years? You just getting the data is only the start of the journey, really.
Yeah, and I think that's what. So one of this client that we work with, they are as like part of what they're offering is consultancy around utilizing data, and because for that very reason of, the likes of me and you can produce graphs for days, but actually it's
Happy to do
understanding.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
It's
the
bread
fun
and
bit.
butter to us. It's doesn't it look nice? But I think there's them actually working with the client to actually understand, well, what is it what's really important to you, because that's often the thing I see with dashboards is it is that problem of everyone's like, well, wouldn't it be great if I could see every single thing about my business on one page? And it's like, well, that's great, but at what point do you ever sit down and say, right, today I'm going to review my entire business? It doesn't work like that. You want to be looking at it in the context of a particular challenge or a particular situation. And like you say, the person that's planning what's going to be made tomorrow isn't going to need the same data as the person who's making sure that all today's tasks are completed.
Mm.
Yeah, and you kind of need to that's often what in the consultancy side I think it starts at a lot of the time, and is that actually who need to see what information, and don't necessarily flood them with other information, because that just then people just see a page of numbers or a page of graphs and just turn
Data
off.
blindness, yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly that. Yeah.
Matt, this has been really interesting. I just spotted the time. We've been talking for a while.
Oh, sorry.
No, this is an absolute pleasure. I mean, this is. I think I'd like to think that we'll look back on conversations like this in 5 years' time, and we'll either say, "Wow, we did not see it going that way," or we'll be quietly confident that it's not how we react to new technology; it's how we perceive technology as a whole that actually makes the difference. That's my opinion. I'm not thrusting that kind of
Yeah, I
on you
think
at
that's
all.
fair.
So, just for fun, where do you think we'll be in 10 years with AI?
There's a big saying, isn't it? It's that we overestimate what's going to change in 10 years, but underestimate what's going to change in 5 years.
Yeah.
And so I think we're still a way off of having anything serious like, cars that drive themselves, all of this kind of stuff. I think really what we'll be seeing, certainly in the 5 year window, is just like good quality personalization in lots of aspects of our lives. I think is going to be a big part of it, driven by AI. I think also, I think we'll probably get more used to some tasks being completely kind of automated,
Hmm.
and AI becoming a way of getting things done remotely. So, for example, I know like now they've started doing things like using facial recognition on your driver's license against you to see that you're actually who you say you are. And I think there'll be a lot of that kind of stuff that sort of is probably some of the first ports of call. And I think that's what we'll see a lot of. I think actually fundamentally, you know, it's not going to be that different, just probably an extension of what we've seen of more automation, more clever ways of doing things, of breaking down barriers in terms of basically making it easier for people to spend money. I think is going to be the that seems to be what drives it. It's so that's what I think will happen. I'm sure, like you say, look back at this in 10 years and we'll see it's actually, I'll be sitting there in a hovercraft thinking,
Oh, we
called
were
that one wrong.
promised hover cars many, many years ago.
Yeah.
Back to the Future. That documentary, Back to the Future, lied to us. Um, so, Matt, I really enjoyed your company. It's been a fascinating chat. So, before we go, how can people find out more about your business?
Yeah. So you can find us on chickdigital.co.uk, or you can look us up on LinkedIn. I think if you search for me, Matt Chick, or for our Chick Digital on there, you should be able to find us. We're based in Colchester, so if anyone's in Colchester and east of England, so if anyone's around that way, feel free to give us a shout and we can have a coffee.
Brilliant. So, final thing, going to ask every guest this. Every guest who's a consultant or an operative. What's your favourite type of project? What's the one that when it comes in you think, yes, this is going to be great. This is my thing. This is what I love.
At the moment, I love anything to do with AI and data. To be honest, anything to do with AI and data gets me really interested because I'm one. That's just the way my brain works. I find content and stuff like that really confusing. And, I kind of, first time I got excited about it was when I was able to turn it into numbers to say, oh, look.
Now I understand it.
Yeah, now that makes sense. So, yeah, anything to do with data always gets me interested because I always think there's so much potential in data, and AI is just, to me, an extension of that in lots of ways because it just helps us analyze and understand that data quicker. But to me, that's also the area where I always think you can have the biggest impact the quickest because so much data isn't used, and the possibilities it opens up just by actually understanding what's happening on a day-to-day basis, either in your business or in the places you operate, is just huge. So yeah, definitely. If anyone that's got any data or data-based projects, not only will I buy you a coffee, you might even get a cake as well out of that one.
I've been making notes throughout this, and you said so many quotable things, and just there, so much data is never used. That's just put it on a t-shirt, Matt. Just that's what a great quote. That's so brilliant. Okay, well, as you probably gathered, listeners, I could carry on chatting to Matt kind of all the rest of the day, but I'm not going to because unfortunately I've got to go and do other things, and now I want cake. So, Matt, once again, thank you ever so much. Is there any final thoughts, or would you just like to say goodbye to close the show?
No, that's thank you, Andrew. No, it's been really good. Really enjoyed it, and looking forward to hearing some of the other people in the series.